Let's start though with a few assertions. I think when and this might be useful in thinking about the new publication or venture or whatever it is to end up creating. That sometimes I might think start to think immediately about what the whole thing looks like, how it's going to be packaged, and I would urge you to try not to focus on that immediately, because your potential audience is not thinking about that at all. They could care less and are not in the framework of thinking about like what it is holistically. Even though of course you'll have to think about that, and we do think quite a bit about what quartz is holistically. If we've got some page on quartz that has all the all of our coverage of the energy industry, well, that's great for us, but our readers don't care. They don't demand it. More controversially, I think our readers also don't demand articles, and I mean simply they're not waking up in the morning thinking I just can't wait to read some articles. Like that's not the mindset they're in. And then even more controversially, I thought about maybe deleting this one before taking it to a journalism school, but I think they are also not saying like I can't wait to read the news. That's not to say there isn't interest in news. In fact, I think it's quite the opposite. But it's simply not the mindset in which people are operating when they wake up and boot up, or more likely pull out their phone and go online. It's not what's the news. Some people, all of us, I'm sure, may be thinking that, but I don't think that's the common mindset. But there is a demand, I would assert, for things, and then I'll try to give you some more definition of what I mean by that. But before then, I often start with this slide. I like it a lot because it's a Pew Research study of Americans, although I would imagine the trend's even more pronounced outside the U.S. And what I like about it is I probably don't at this point need to show you a slide about the rise of mobile or rise of social as distribution points for news, but in this chart I see both of those trends happening, but it gives it a little more focus and maybe fleshes out what I mean by the previous slide as well. So Pew asks Americans when during the day did they get their news, and it wasn't long ago when people were equally divided between having a habit. And that, of course, the most obvious news habit would be over breakfast with the paper for a half hour or so. But that would also, a habit would also include checking CNN.com over lunch every day. But as you can see, that type of news habit has quickly deteriorated, and the new news habit is no habit at all. And so in different studies, or when it's asked in different ways, we also see some potentially really scary data that might suggest that there isn't, people are reading less news, or there's less demand for journalism overall. I almost was saying that earlier, but I don't think that's quite it. What's happening here in my estimation is if you're on the upward sloping line, the no news habit is just that news has seeped into people's lives in a way that's much more haphazard, in ways that that they're not really thinking about as news. I'll explain a little bit more what I mean, but just to give one example, your Facebook news feed is probably the single biggest distributor of news right now, at least for online publications. And when someone logs on to Facebook, they're hardly in the mindset that they're going to be consuming news, or that this is their time of day for news. They're in the mindset of updates from their friends, photos of their friends' children, or the party last night, that sort of thing. And if they happen to encounter news, which fortunately for us they do, well, that's that's a bonus, or that's sort of incidental. That's the upward sloping line. The only last thing I'd say about this is it's really clear that if you were one of those news organizations that earlier in the last decade enjoyed a half hour of uninterrupted time with a reader over breakfast, that was a privilege. And if that habit is deteriorating, you're at enormous risk. That's maybe the simplest way to describe what's happening to our industry more broadly. But if you're a publication coming into existence on the right side of the chart, obviously like us, or just willing to give up the regular time with readers and ride that other line that's sloping upwards, I think it's a huge opportunity.